One of the things to keep in mind when you're checking the coolant temperature sensor and you're checking the here's the connector. This is the connector for the coolant temperature sensor right here. When you're checking the voltage at that connector according to the factory service manual, you want the engine on, your operating temperature, engine on, ignition on, engine stop. You'll check the voltage across the harness connector terminals, which is 410 and 452. 452 is the ground. 410 is pin 4 on the, which is the coolant temperature sensor, on the black connector of the electronic control module. Pin 4. Back view of the black connector. So what you're looking at between those two terminals is for the voltage. If you see, check the voltage between terminals 410, 452 over 4 volts. If the voltage is above 4 volts, the electronic control module and the wiring are okay. So that's one of the things that you want to verify and confirm. So if your electronic control module is good and all your wiring is okay, it's probably going to be in the sensor itself. But after you check for the voltage, you know, of course you go and you check the ohms. Yeah, I usually don't tell people to buy tools or not to buy tools or what to buy or anything, but if you're going to test your coolant temperature sensor system on a 1984 Corvette, you can pick up one of these testing harnesses right here for, I don't know, probably $10 give or take. But this makes testing the coolant temperature sensor system on a 1984 Corvette very, very simple. This is the old coolant temperature sensor right here. It came out of the car. You can just plug this with this sensor in the car. You can plug this connector into the sensor. Then you have 2 leads. I just put a piece of tape on there to keep them from touching each other, but you can, then it has 2 leads that you can plug into your connector, your actual connector that comes from your electronic control module. And then what that leaves you is sticking out here is 2 alligator clip test terminals that you can just hook up your multimeter to. And with that system right there, all you have to do is work your multimeter from DC voltage over to ohms. And again, it just makes it really easy, and I think it's only like $10 to get that harness. I'm thinking probably I found some of my problem, if not all of it. I don't know. I won't know until I put a new sensor in there, but I'm running some tests on the coolant temperature sensor. And what you have to do is you have to get the car up to operating temperature, which I let the car warm up until the thermostat opened up, and the car got up to about 205 degrees, and I made sure the thermostat was open and everything was running. And then what you do is you shut the car off, and you have the key to the on position. But according to the factory service manual, the normal operating temperature, the voltage on the coolant temperature sensor should be between 1 and 1.5 volts at ECM terminal number 4, which is the circuit 410. Well, in order to check the coolant temperature sensor, which is 6E2-30, you have to run, for all these tests, you have to run the car up to operating temperature, engine at normal operating temperature, and then you can start running tests on the coolant temperature sensor, and then the actual voltage at the connector and the voltage at the electronic control module, which is circuit 410, pin number 4. So I'll get the engine up to operating temperature, then turn the camera back on. So when I hooked up a digital voltmeter, you can just hook up a digital voltmeter to the actual coolant temperature sensor and put it to DC volts, and you should. I was getting, of course it's not connected up now, but I was getting 1.2 volts. It should be between 1 and 1.5 volts, and then you can switch the digital voltmeter over to ohms. The ignition on, engine stop, check the voltage between the harness connector terminals. So you would have to disconnect the connector from the coolant temperature sensor, key on, engine at operating temperature, and you want to look at the voltage between 410 and 452, which is ground, and circuit 410, which is the coolant sensor signal, should be over 4 volts. I was getting 5.2 volts, showing 5.28 volts. According to the factory service manual, you want to disconnect the coolant sensor, ignition on, engine stop, check the voltage across the connector terminals 410 to 452. Should be over 4 volts. Then you want to check the resistance across the sensor terminals. Should be more than 100 ohms. And then what you want to do after that is you want to just turn the digital voltmeter over to ohms, and you want to check the resistance. And that's where I ran into that's where I saw some odd anomalies. I was actually not getting any resistance at all. Should be seeing some resistance on the sensor terminals. I'm not seeing any. I'm not seeing any readings. According to the factory service manual, the resistance across the terminals should be more than 100 ohms. If the voltage is too low, it says it should be less than 1,000 ohms. If the signal voltage is too high, I'm not showing infinite resistance on the actual coolant temperature sensor terminals. On the actual terminals themselves, I was getting no resistance, and so it says the resistance across the sensor should be more than 100 ohms. But this is if you're getting a low voltage signal, and if not, okay, replace the sensor. So I'm thinking I've got a problem here with my coolant temperature sensor. I'm going to be honest, it was a cheap $8 knockoff. I got it some aftermarket auto parts store. I put it in there. I don't know why I did that. I usually don't do things like that. That's when a lot of my problems started. But even if your you're getting a high voltage signal, you should see resistance at operating temperature over 4 volts. Check your resistance across the sensor terminal. Should be less than 1,000 ohms. And again, I was getting no resistance at all. I'm thinking the sensor probably is just no good, or it was manufactured no good, or it just is no good. I don't know. Another thing I found, I think I had another problem, is the top radiator hose where it goes into the radiator. This is the first time I ever noticed that. When I got it up to operating temperature, I was working underneath the hood here, just watching the engine work, and I noticed that hose was leaking down on the radiator. The hose was loose. It's the first time I ever noticed that. So that's going to cause problems too. That's going to cause air bubbles in the system, which is going to affect the coolant temperature sensor. And I'm going to run a radiator pressure test on it later, and I'll make another video on that. Kind of heard At one time I heard a little hissing coming from the radiator cap. Yeah, I'd never heard that before. But I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it this go around, so I don't know. I'm just gonna have to, like I say, run a radiator test. But I went around, tightened up all the hoses and everything, and I'm not hearing any more. I'm not hearing any hissing. I'm not seeing any leaks anywhere. But I'm going to go ahead and run a radiator pressure test on it. But right now, that's pretty promising as far as my problem with my stalling and overheating, because I didn't. What you have to understand about the coolant temperature sensor is it affects fuel delivery, engine timing, knock, and it also affects idle air control and the converter clutch, torque converter clutch. So that's that could be one of the reasons is why I just wanted to hesitate really bad. So, like I say, I got a new sensor, a good one, and I'm going to put that in and see where I stand from there. I'll just probably update. Also, I wanted to say I use this multimeter to check my voltage and my resistance on my coolant temperature sensor. It was so bizarre, the reading. I actually hooked up another just to be sure, and I actually got the same readings on another multimeter. So it's not the meter, it's not me, it's in that sensor. Most likely that coolant temperature sensor causes a lot of problems on this car. I should have known better. I should have tested that one first. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a new temperature sensor in there. I went with this Duralast SU109. These are made by Wells Engineering, which is an old reputable firm. They've been around since the beginning of Ford Motor. So it comes with tapered threads, already coated with sealant. I'm gonna burp the radiator after I take this sensor out and put a new one in. So I'm not gonna drain any coolant out of the radiator. So I'm going to lose a little bit of coolant when I take off this the old sensor here. I'm going to lose a little coolant, but I'll get the other one ready to go in. So I'll put a new cooling temperature sensor in there. Like I told you, Duralast, is running really good now. So tightened up some of the hoses. I had a hissing from that hose over there. Tightened up all the hoses. I'm going to run a radiator pressure test on it tomorrow. I'll put that new coolant temperature sensor in there. It is really running really good now. So I don't know. I haven't taken it for a long drive, but I think that's a problem solved. I guess I'll see. If not, I'll make another video. Tell you I'm back at it again. But I think that's probably it. It hasn't run this smooth in quite a while.